Eric. So yeah, so Eric gave some pretty good background on how I got involved in this, and I'm actually, to be clear, I'm very honored to be part of the LISA 2020 network and part of everything that LISA is doing. I'm very glad that he reached out to me and then asked me to be part of this. So as he mentioned, I am the performance monitoring specialist for the LISA 2020 network. And as part of that, so part of what I do, many of you who are part of the network probably know me because I send you emails, once every quarter to collect some metrics from you and learn about all the impacts and outcomes that are coming out of this network. And it's pretty amazing to see all of that. But part of doing that is learning about some of the challenges and some of the things that our network has been successful at over that time as well. And so along those lines, today we have 3 professors from 3 different LISA stat labs who all got, and Eric mentioned the USAID grant that we have been working under for a few years. As part of that, each of these labs received sub-awards to work on their own projects. And so we asked them today to share with you some of these specific lessons that they have learned while transforming evidence to action in the context of those specific projects. And so our first speaker is from the University of Ibadan, from UI-LISA, and that is Professor Olubusoye. And their project that they were working on was enhancing electoral participation in Nigeria. And so again, I've asked them not necessarily to talk about the outcomes of their projects, but more about the surrounding challenges and things they've been successful with. So Professor, would you like to unmute yourself and share your screen?
Yeah.
Great.
Do I have the floor now?
Yes, please.
Great. So let me share my screen. Are you able to see the screen?
It says that you've started screen sharing, but I can't see the presentation yet.
And while Professor Olubusoye is sharing his screen, right there it is. I just want to again welcome everybody in attendance, and thank you for joining our LISA 2020 Symposium Plenary session today. And we look forward to hearing from Professor Olubusoye and others.
Can you see the screen now?
Yes, we can see it.
Great. So let me start by saying good day to everyone listening and participating in this plenary session. I will be sharing with you the UI-LISA experience in the course of implementing the LISA 2020 Transforming Evidence to Action project funded by USAID. The title of UI-LISA project is Enhancing Election Participation in Nigeria. Before going further, I need to acknowledge the funding agency, USAID, because without this support, certainly the project cannot be executed. Next is the University of Colorado Boulder, USA, for approving the sub-award to UI-LISA. Professor Eric Vance is a resourceful and talented manager of human resources. I see him more as a born leader and an excellent mentor. Thank you. Finally, I recognize our local partner in this project, the Independent National Electoral Commission, through its research and training unit called the Electoral Institute. The agency is probably being represented in this virtual panel discussion by Dr. Ibrahim Sani, the Director of Research and Documentation in the Electoral Institute. Okay, so the concept of transforming evidence to action is what I call tea. It's not a coffee tea. The concept tends to situate start labs between development challenges, knowledge creation through the collection of evidence, and feeding the policymakers, development actors, and researchers to enable them to transform the society and improve the quality of life. Start labs are supposed to be the engine of transformation. It is the responsibility of the start labs to be conscious of the development challenges within their vicinity and mobilize resources to gather reliable, useful, timely, and relevant evidence to assist the policymaker. For UI-LISA, the development challenge observed at the national level revolves around election participation. Participation in elections in Nigeria is actually the end of a process. The starting point of the process involves participation in the continuous voter registration CVR exercise organized by INEC. If the participation is successful, then the name of the citizen is included in the voter register. Only those listed in the voter register are qualified to participate in the voting exercise. The process poses several developmental challenges, which include: one, being eligible to participate in CVR, but unable because of systemic or self-imposed hindrances. A problem of compromised voter register, which could eventually lead to unwillingness to participate in the final stage of voting. This table gives a global idea of the issues involved in the entire electoral process. The years are previous election years in Nigeria. This is followed by the national population, from where the voting age population is drawn. The registered voters are drawn from the voting age population, and the population of actual voters is a subset of the registered voters. One striking and noticeable feature of this distribution is where a subset is bigger than the whole. In 1979, 1983, 1993, the population of registered voters, a part, far exceeds the voting age population, a whole. This is embarrassingly true due to several reasons. Chief among them, the population figures are projected, censuses are conducted irregularly and always controversial, lack of proper coordination among relevant government agencies. Unfortunately, the electoral body cannot utilize information it does not have or provided with. Beyond the census palaver, evidence from INEC on those listed in the voter register and those who participated in voting in the last 6 consecutive elections are shown above in the slide, in the graph as well as in the table being displayed. The percentage turnout, which is the ratio of those who participated in the voting to those listed in the register, is in the 4th column of the table. Two quick observations can be made here. One, the register keeps increasing in subsequent election year. Two, conversely, participation in voting keeps decreasing in subsequent election year. Thus, turnout rate has been on a downward trend. This situation portends serious danger to democratic governance. So in our study, the first objective was to investigate the causes of non-participation in the CVR exercise. We found the reasons to include those listed on the slide. Money was demanded before one could be registered. INEC officials failed to show up for registration at the appointed time, and so on and so forth. The second objective focused on the voter register. We interrogated the register to determine, one, proportion of under 18 registrants. We found just 12% of our sampled cases to be underaged. Two, proportion of dead registrants still in the register. We found just 1.25% of our sample cases to be dead registrants. Three, proportion of registrants whose addresses have changed. We found 12.36% of our sample cases to have relocated to a new address not known to the electoral body. The third objective examines the causes of
It looks like Professor Olubusoye is frozen. Let's give a second to see if he can come back. And while we're waiting, I would just, okay, looks like he probably logged off and he'll come back. While we're waiting, I would just, especially for those of you who are members of the LISA 2020 network, to think about how some of the lessons some of what he's talking about and some of the lessons that he has learned in his project could help your lab with funded projects in the future. Okay, looks like Eric would like to share a slide with us in the meantime while we're waiting for Professor Olubusoye to return.
Yes, so as Professor Olubusoye talked about, the project, this electoral project that he's discussing and the lessons learned from that project was funded by the U.S. Agency for International Development as part of our Creating Institutional Statistical Analysis and Data Science Capacity project. So this funding is also what has enabled Professor Adebanji and Professor Ganguli's projects as well that we'll hear about later today. So I just wanted to show this slide. And since we have, it looks like we're waiting for Professor Olubusoye's connection to come back. I want to ask people if anybody has submitted an invited paper session proposal to the ISI World Statistics Congress. So the International Statistical Institute is also a partner of LISA 2020, and the the biannual World Statistics Congress will be held online next July 2021. And as part of the World Statistics Congress, there are invited paper sessions and then contributed papers. And so we have in the past 3 World Statistics Congresses, LISA 2020 has been represented in invited paper sessions, and I hope that that continues. So I'm just going to ask, as we're waiting, if anybody has has submitted an invited paper session. And in the chat, I will send a link to.
I just sent a link to the general conference webpage, but there's also one. Actually, if you just go there and click on the link about submission, it's right there on that page.
Hello.
Hello.
Welcome back.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Those are evidence of underdevelopment. Sorry. Kim, I sent the link to you. Can you help me to open it?
And let's see if I can share my screen at the same, let's see, I have to share screen and try this. Share. Can you see the slide on my screen?
Slide 9. Slide 9.
I can't see the slide numbers.
Okay, I would. Okay. Yeah, this place, yes.
Let me know when I should change the slide.
Thank you very much. So, I was saying that due to controversies or debate around measurement of voter registration, I said the third objective examined the causes of non-participation in the voting exercise. So as a preliminary investigation, we examined accreditation status and voting status. And I said, to the credit of INEC, we found no one to have voted without being accredited. However, 1.2% of the sampled voters got accredited but never participated in the final stage of voting. On the causes of non-participation in the voting, we listed 5 topmost ones, which are on the screen. Next slide. So again, due to controversies on debate around the measurement of voter registration turnout, we proposed 5 alternative measures. The standardized voter turnout, which is the 6th one, has been in use by INEC. The new ones are the one listed from 1 to 5. Voting age ratio, basic voter registration turnout, standardized voter registration turnout, basic voter turnout, and crude voter turnout. Next slide. Now, on the lessons, I have grouped them under 4 C's. The first C is connecting. The second C is collaborating. Third one is communicating. And the 4th one is creating. Although constrained by time, under connecting, I will share our experience on how we got connected with our local partner and policy actor, INEC. How smooth was the process? What were the challenges? And how did we address them? And then draw lessons. Under collaborating, I will share how we work together to achieve a common goal and produce results. Under communication, I will explain how we carry the stakeholders along and informed and get them informed. I will also draw some lessons. And finally, under creating, I will discuss about the dissemination of the research outcomes and the sustainability of the existing partnership. Next slide. So connecting with INEC took about 3 months, due largely to lack of understanding of the protocols and administrative procedures within the commission. Rather than connecting with the secretary to the commission, we were making fruitless efforts to connect with the honorable chairman of the commission. Also, we were requesting for a courtesy visit to see the chairman when we should have just stated our mission and request. So when connecting was becoming impossible, we used pressure groups facilitated by LISA 2020 Director, Professor Eric Vance. He facilitated our contact with INEC through USAID Washington, USAID Nigeria, and the International Foundation for Electoral Systems. For me, the lessons from connecting are: 1, if you don't initiate the connection, if you don't start it with policy actors, you may never be connected. 2, you have to combine multiple approaches to achieve the connection. And finally, you don't have to be discouraged or feel disappointed for any reason. Next slide. So with regard to collaborating, the real challenge in collaborating with policy actors is the fact that you have a partnership in which the consensual power is not balanced. The collaborating partners are not equal in any way. The policy actor is often the dominating partner, partly because of the desire to receive their full cooperation to ensure that your project is executed successfully as planned. In our case, INEC was not going to make any financial commitment to the project, despite being the ultimate beneficiary. Sometimes also, opinions are sharply divided, and at times, needed information are classified or considered as classified. The solution we adopted was to accommodate whatever was possible, particularly on the budget side. We also often accepted their opinion. So there must be trade-off somehow. The lessons for Start Labs are many. The leadership must show competency on the subject matter and be technically sound. The Start Lab team and leadership must be honest, transparent, accountable, open, and trustworthy in sustaining the collaboration. Next slide. Here I talk about communication. So communicating is very key, or rather, so it must be comprehensive, must be truthful and timely. In our project, we had to communicate with 3 major stakeholders, namely University of Ibadan Research Management Office, the INEC through the Electoral Institute, and USAID through LISA 2020. The whole essence of communication is to give updates, inform about the challenges, and give future plans. Though the guidance of Kim Love, who is my chairperson now, and who is the LISA 2020 monitoring and evaluation expert, we were able to develop 8 monitoring and reporting indicators, and they are listed there. So we report those indicators on a monthly basis, 8 of them. The real challenge is that generating these monthly reports and compiling them and compiling the data for computing the indicators can be intimidating. The lessons here include start lab leaders must delegate and share responsibilities. They must be organized and keep records. They must leverage on the cloud technology, cloud storage technologies such as Google Drive, Google Docs, Google Photo, Dropbox, Slack, etc. Next slide. So finally, transforming evidence to action must create a shareable knowledge. The form or the manner to share the knowledge will be a challenge. Secondly, sustaining the collaboration to improve on the existing knowledge is also another challenge. Thus, what we are doing now is that we are creating 2 publications, policy briefs and monograph, containing the full report of the project for easy dissemination and for future reference. To ensure sustainability, we are working together with our policy actor, that is INEC and the Electoral Institute, to build the statistical capacity of their staff. So beyond this present, this project, we are trying to look at other possible areas of collaboration. So START labs involved in transforming evidence to action project must think outside the box and think far beyond the lifespan of the current project. There must be sustainability plan to sustain the collaboration and relevance of the lab. Next slide. So this is just the cover page of the full report. It's already with the press. Hopefully it will come out before the end of this year. Next. This is the cover page for policy briefs. There are 3 independent policy briefs contained in the publication. Each of them addressing each of the objectives. Next slide. So just to show some historical pictures. This is a project implementation committee meeting at different sessions. Yes, next slide. This is INEC, the Electoral Institute team being received on behalf of the Vice Chancellor, by the Deputy Vice Chancellor. Next slide. Here you have the pictures of the training session conducted for INEC Electoral Institute by USAID-LISA in Abuja. Next slide. Here you have the participants at the focus group discussion on apathy towards continuous voter registration and elections. Last slide. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Olubusoye. That was a great presentation, and I think you've shared a lot of really important lessons that I think it's very important for us to be able to talk about as a network. So I really appreciate that. I think we will come back for questions at the end of the presentations after all three presenters have spoken. So our next presenter is Professor Tanuki Adebanji at KNUST LISA. Looks like okay, yeah, and we can see your screen just fine. So her project was related to training female scientists to basically become more familiar with the ideas of data science and statistics, and to be able to apply that in their professions so that they can go out and make more impacts. Professor Adebanji, are you ready?
Hello.
Okay, great. We can hear you just fine. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Well, good afternoon, some good evening, and some good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to share again some of the lessons we have learned at KNUST LISA. So I'll be taking you through for about 15 minutes. I hope to keep to the time then. My name, like you said, is Tanuki Adebanji. Our project was titled Building Capacity of Female Scientists in Data Analysis for Decision-Making and Strategic Planning. So the overall objective for our program, competence in data analysis and how to integrate the data that they use in their everyday work, whether in the research institute or like in the food and drugs agencies where they work. So we're also more interested in how to use this data for policy making and how to also plan strategically for their institutions and then for maybe national development as well. Beyond that, we also were focused on developing leadership for these women because of the underrepresentation that we have observed of females in higher management levels that we have. Hoping to do this, we intended and we achieved to do, we're able to do this actually by providing mentoring platform for. We had a cohort of 25 females initially, and then we're able to also maintain this number in the second batch. So our specific objective for this 25 females, which we added one from our institution to make 26 in the first group. So the specific objectives were one, to build their data analysis and ability to interpret the data and make sense of what the data is telling them so that the data can inform their decision-making process and also that the data can inform their policy formulation, and then also be able to use the data in the second objective to assess the performance and the implementation of the policies. That was the second one. And ultimately for the third one is to make sure that these ladies or these women are prepared to assume leadership positions as they progress in their respective careers and to provide adequate mentoring for the participants. Our collaborating institutions, initially we had 3 key institutions we were collaborating with. And that is the KNUST School of Public Health, because we had been discussing with the School of Public Health concerning the performance of the females in the MPH program, that's the Masters in Public Health, because I was also a student on that program some years ago. And then most of the time, there's an apathy of the female students in the postgraduate classes towards data analysis, and anything that had to do with statistics was they treated it with a kind of phobia, and they had a clear apathy towards that. So we had been discussing with the dean then, before the opportunity came up that we could submit the proposal. And then with the MESTI, which is the Ministry of Environment, Science, Technology, and Innovation, we had engaged them on the platform of women in STEM. So we were not completely new to them, but we did not engage them full-time as a collaborating partners. So it was quite easy for us to move the relationship to the level where we were both working on the development of the proposal, because they wanted some key skills to be addressed, especially when it comes to policy development and then implementation. They gave us the input for that aspect. The third one is CSIR, which is our Council for Scientific and Industrial Research in Ghana. They initially were not part of our collaborators, but when we set out the call for participation, they were very interested, and then they contacted us, and because CSIR has about 13 research institutions in Ghana, and they actually almost swamped the slots, because almost 40% of the applicants were from their institutions. So, but we could only give space to 4 of them, and then they have been talking to us on how to come and replicate some of the trainings we have given their 4 ladies at some of their institutions. So hopefully we should be able to get to that. So that's how come the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, and they've been also part of the feedback that we have received from our collaborators, and we've also been informing them on the progress. The implementation timeline for our project, it actually started in second quarter of 2018. And that was when we're writing the proposal back and forth between LISA, Colorado, and then KNUST and MESTI and the School of Public Health. And when we're able to finally get through with that, then we started the project actually in the second quarter of 2019, when we had the first training session. We had 2 training sessions for the same cohort of women. Maybe let's not say exactly the same, maybe about 95% of the females were the same group. So the first training was focused on statistical data analysis, and then how to work with that data, how to visualize data, and how to do some basic statistical modeling. And for the second workshop, we focused on the policy implementation, policy formulation, and then leadership. So the second workshop took place in November of 2019. That was after on the job assessment. Between 3 to 6 months after the first workshop, all the participants were visited at their respective institutions to see how they were using what they had learned in the first workshop on their job. And then we also, during this visit, engaged their immediate supervisors, because during the application process, they were to apply recommendations from 2 of their immediate supervisors. So we had to get feedback from those who had recommended them to the program. So that is, by the end of 2019, we had done the second workshop. And then after the first workshop, the first report was submitted. And after the second workshop, we have also submitted the second report, which was submitted, I think just a few months ago. And then where we are today is we were supposed to do a 1-year post-training assessment, but we issue now we're not able to do that. That was supposed to have been November. That would have been 1 year after the second training, and then. But what we plan to do is to close our project, since essentially we've achieved all of our stipulated objectives, and then submit a final report and documentation to to LISA, Colorado, through our university. Did was to have continuous service. We had one before the first workshop, which was assessed what skills they felt was most necessary for them to progress in their careers or to. So the first workshop, we did another survey to assess if these expectations were met. And then, of course, we did again on the job pre-workshop. The second workshop, they actually were part of the development. We involved the ladies, participants, now team. So we worked together in fashioning what they actually wanted, what they needed in the second workshop. And then after the second workshop, gave us the opportunity for continuous data generation, and that's what we relatively easily. Training is read here because that's the one I said we have not been able to implement. Overall, most of our participants have been, they're still always in touch with us even now. What are some of the challenges that we faced, and then some of the lessons in our implementation? The first, not in any particular order, please. The first one is the human resource. The core team, which is the KNUST LISA team, which we had thought or we had hoped to continue with to the end of the project. But when the assessment came back, in the first workshop, some lecturers were not KNUST team, our LISA team. So we had to reassign some of their responsibilities. We had to spread our nets wider, look for more, maybe more, I don't want to say more competent, yeah, more competent and more experienced hands, especially when it came to policy implementation and policy formulation and leadership, and then management as well. When we saw that this was very important to the participants in their request for training. So we had to change our team. The core team still remained the same, but we had to bring in a lot more people. We're going to social sciences. We had to go to planning for policy persons. We had to stretch wide, but we tried as much as possible to bring in as many females as we could. And then we also, when stress management became an issue, when we're asking the females on the assessment, what are the issues that they face at their workplace, is stress management. So we had to bring somebody in psychology to speak to the team, the participants on stress management. We also had to bring somebody from the health center in our university to speak on the aging process, how to age gracefully. So we had to make some changes on human. And then what we have learned is that it is important for the team to be flexible and to be able to implement, if you have feedback, to be responsive to the needs of the group you are trying to help. We have to be responsive and be nimble on our feet. Also, we also learned some lessons on the participants. Some of them had peculiar needs, and then their expectations are already dealt with that. So in peculiar needs, what I mean here is that, for instance, we were not expecting any of our participants to be nursing mothers. We didn't ask that. So some women showed up, they had come with their babies and their nannies, their babysitters with them. And then the first workshop, and then we had to immediately change the accommodation we had provided for them from single bedrooms to twin bedrooms, so that they could have room in with the babysitters as well as their babies. Oh, sorry about that. As well as their babies. So, and then we also had a member who was pregnant, and then this was a bit, we had to find ways to make her comfortable because she had to sit for several hours, and that was quite a bit of concern for us. But she never missed a session, and then she had put to bed by the time she was coming for the second workshop, and then they had a baby shower for her then. So those are some of the lessons we learned concerning the participants' needs. And then some of the things we had initially planned to implement during our projects was not been ranked high on their needs assessment that we carried out. Okay, and then our reporting and then our records, we had to do this continuously because all thanks to Dr. Love, she would always request for the quarterly reports. And if you don't have your monthly information, you cannot collate your quarterly report. So one of the things we learned was the importance of adequate and accurate continuous record keeping. Teamwork was tested, was brought to test. I really understood what it meant, what teamwork meant during this project, especially when you have to change members of the team and at the same time maintain a smooth synergy within your team. But on the whole, it was a very nice learning experience, and we had some members of our team that I would call rather die people. You had people like Mina. She was always consistently there for the team. We had Eric. Quite a number of them were very dependable. Degraft, we have a few who were very dependable, and you could count on them any time of the day. These were all important in achieving our objectives. And also, one thing we also learned is the feedback from the participant, feedback from your collaborators. It's very important, and we should be able to implement this as you go along. You should be able to revise your note as you go along and not be static in the implementation. And then when we're looking at the collaborating institutions and policy actors, because we did not intend to directly, as it were, engage them and inform policy. We were rather focused on developing the skills of these women, and then they were to go into their respective domains and engage and inform policy. But sometimes, for instance, when we're dealing with MEST, our key person in MEST, which was the director of the Science and Technology Center there, she changed her jobs. So we then had to learn to work with another person in the course of the project. So some of these changes also happened in our collaborating institutions that we just had to learn as we were progressing. So some of for our outputs and then some of the outcomes, Kim has said we shouldn't dwell too much on this. For the immediate outputs, we will talk about the data management skills, which we immediately were able to assess when we went for the on-the-job assessment for the ladies. How to access open source materials was very important because we brought in a librarian, one of our top librarians in the university, to teach ladies on how to access open source materials and how to create a professional visibility. These were very important, and then with this we were able to measure immediately, and then that was immediate. And then in the short term, we're looking at the number of quality publications which we have been reporting on, the number of successful grant applications and scholarships. We have recorded quite a number of them. It's even much more impressive than what we expected. The number of participants who have enrolled for higher qualifications. I can say that at least 70% of the ladies who did not have PhDs have all enrolled now for the higher qualifications after the participation. We have a number of collaborative research. There's been at least 2 successful collaborations amongst the participants, and then the 2 of them have been able to source for grants for their collaborative research. So another one we're looking at is the ability for them to track their career progression, to self-track it, because part of the things we put them through is how to develop a career progression plan, and then they're all assigned mentors, and the mentors are to work with them on those and to be sure that they actually keep to the career progression plans they have developed. On the long term, what we're hoping to see is the number of promotions or appointment to leadership positions. Actually, we have seen some of this already. And this is what we thought would be on the long-term thing, and it's happening in the short, medium term. The number of higher degrees obtained, we are yet to record that. It's still too early for that. So we're also looking at the number of institutional or government policy documents that were initiated by participants of our program or that involved their. These are the things we'll be looking at out for. And then I hope I've covered everything, but I'd like to, as a funding agency, thanks to Eric Vance and the LISA 2020 team, KNUST, our university, has been very supportive. LISA, my former provost, was she's a food scientist, but she's been very pro statistical capacity development in our college. So we acknowledge KNUST and the KNUST LISA team, with that whom this would not have been possible, and our collaborating partners also been very supportive, and then they have been very accommodating of some of our lapses as well. I'll end by giving this from Steve Jobs. It says, great things in business are never done by one person. They're done by a team of people. So this was done by KNUST LISA team. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor. This was excellent. And I think one comment that I want to make, and I think it's very clear the way that she presented this, you know, her specific population that she was working with was these women scientists. And it's really easy to make a plan for something, but then the implementation, during the implementation, you may find that there are some accommodations and things that need to change that you maybe hadn't really considered until you're actually working with people. And I think even though, you know, some of the accommodations that they made were very specific, I think it's very clear from this how that could apply really to any project where you're working with any specific population of people. So I think that's a great lesson. We will have more time for comments and questions. At the end, we have one more presenter, and that is Professor Baswati Ganguli from the University of Calcutta. And they were working on using data science to support renewable energy projects. So good evening, Professor Ganguli. I can't hear you.
All right, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. I can hear you now. And I think we're about to see your screen. Great. I will turn it over to you. Thank you.
So thank you first for giving me the opportunity to explore the scope for applying data science to the field of clean energy, and also to share the lessons learned. So this was the brief which we got from Tim for this event, but the purpose is not so much to talk about the technical work which we did in course of the project, but more to focus on barriers, challenges, and successes, and to do it in a way that would be useful to future labs trying to undertake similar work. So I'm going to try to do justice to this brief. Barriers. Well, let me give you some context about where AI and data science are in India. So this is from a news item. You can see the heading says that artificial intelligence was the real showstopper for the Kumbh Mela 2019. The Kumbh Mela is a particular religious event in India, which is organized on a massive scale. So massive in India means that about 200 million people participated in the event. Now, this is an event which made it to the Guinness Book of World Records, not because of how many people participated, but because it is considered to be the world's largest ever deployment of artificial intelligence at a single event. And you can see on this slide the various areas: disease surveillance, traffic management, waste disposal, etc., where artificial intelligence was employed. And also some of the methods which were used, such as having smart cameras, facial recognition, and interlinked integrated command and control center, live streaming, etc. So at this event, which involved 200 million people, it was completely incident-free because of the successful employment of artificial intelligence. Digital India is a big buzzword in government circles. So I have some pictures of related events. RAISE is a recent summit on the scope for employment of artificial intelligence in governance. I participated in this recently, and there were very rewarding sessions on how this can be done in India to promote development, social development, health, etc. Umang is a very ambitious scheme of our government, which tries to provide a single mobile app which will give every citizen access to 100-odd government departments on the same platform. DigiLocker is a scheme by which every single Indian citizen gets access to about 1 GB of storage space on the cloud. So the potential for this, for data science, is that it enables us to store all our documents on the cloud. So potentially, given access to this, it could mean a lot of sustained applications of data management and tracking a person's over time. So in this context, when we were, well, here is another related news article. So despite this tremendous interest in artificial intelligence and data science, it's not really the science which is so much, the science or the technology which is so much the handicap to growth of data science in India. The real handicap is data. So that's what this news article says. It says that while a lot of digital data is collected, it's collected mainly for reporting purposes and not necessarily for scientific application, as a result of which we don't necessarily get rich enough data, which can lead to more usage of data science. So this is one conundrum in the scope for using data science in India. Now, when we submitted this project to USAID, we each had to arrive at some application area, and we had chosen clean energy based on looking at some briefs of our Ministry of External Affairs, which identified energy as an area of mutual interest for the United States and India. So India currently does have this ambitious national goal to install 175 gigawatts of renewable power. So this has actually increased to about 4 times this target. Here you can see the name of several initiatives which have been formed for this. The US-India Clean Energy Finance Initiative, the US-India Clean Energy Hub, and another huge concurrent initiative of USAID called Greening the Grid. So rather than being a help to us, this unfortunately came in the shape of a barrier, because it seems that the way that USAID works is that they outsource each of these separate projects to separate consultants. And because of the way the data sharing agreements are, they can't really share the data or make it available to scientific researchers. So in theory, there is a lot of data and science and technology available, but paradoxically, the availability of data has really been the biggest barrier to pursuing this project. Challenges. Professor Olubusoye said, always initiate the communication. So this is sort of my take on it. There is a lot in the literature by poets and songwriters about which warns us to not be foolish and rush into a job. And then there is also this rejoinder, which says that sometimes the fool who rushes in gets the job done. So the first job we had when we started this project was to identify collaborators. And we sort of did what is written on this slide. We rushed into one of my students rushed into the Center for Clean Energy, which is like a big government-funded institute which works on clean energy in the same city. And we tried to convince them that they were losing out by not using data science. And somehow it did strike a chord among them, and then they visited us and it evolved from there. But to make that first move to identify collaborators, this is about the most scientific thing which I can recommend to you. The next big challenge is to find data. It's not just to find data, but it's concurrent with the fact that in a short-term project, you do have to meet certain targets and to show a certain amount of work done by a certain period. So we did talk with the Center for Green Energy in identifying potential sub-projects, but we also did tailor it to what data was available and to what our areas of specialization were. So these were the 4 areas which we decided to focus on. The first was forecasting. So specifically short-term forecasting was pointed out as something of great scientific interest by our collaborators. We have long worked in the area of trying to quantify the effect of pollution, and we were really keen to quantify the impact of dust deposition on solar panels. But it was a big challenge to get data on dust deposition. Our collaborators at the Center for Green Energy were in the process of building this experimental setup which could mimic what was happening with an actual solar energy panel in terms of dust deposition. But we did not really have the time to wait for them to develop this, so we just decided to use ambient pollution as a proxy for dust deposition. So this did actually interest our collaborators, and we are in the process of submitting a manuscript to the journal Solar Energy, where we have done this, quantify the impact of ambient pollution on solar energy generation. For some time now, we have been working in the field of trying to find an index for financial inclusion. And our third sub-project, Dr. Pooja Shengupta has been working on, relates to finding the synergy between financial inclusion and renewable energy. The fourth, which directly relates to the thesis work done by a student, she is trying to synthesize text data with quantitative data. So because text data is readily available, we thought that one sub-project could be to use text analytics to try and identify the trends in investment in the field of renewable energy. So these are the 4 initial sub-projects which we started with. In terms of data, we were actually lucky to get some data from something called the SRRA network. It's the Solar Radiation Resource Network. So as you can see, these are the variables: air temperature, dew point, wind speed, wind direction. It is not perfect data by any means. It's available at certain stations across India. There are many missing values. Some of the data is quite suspicious. But as I said, we had to make a start, and we really wanted to come up with some small case studies which we could use to motivate other potential collaborators. So we started with this. We did look into a literature along with the collaborators, but we also decided to start with methodology which we were comfortable with. In our case, it was semi-parametric regression. So here is a semi-parametric regression which tries to decompose GHI. GHI stands for Global Horizontal Irradiance. It is what is used to quantify solar energy. So we tried to decompose it into the variations which could be attributed to air temperature, dew point, precipitation, time, month, etc. And this kind of a decomposition, it did strike a chord with our collaborators, and we presented this at the first joint workshop which we had. And we have since moved on to more topical areas of interest, such as prediction, but this was our starting point. Another starting point was trying to explain the gap in actual energy and the generated energy. The reason there is a gap is because of pollution. So we use something called multimodal inference, which we were working on at that time. The interesting idea in multimodal inference is that it is not necessary that there is always one perfect model. It's possible that there could be two competing models. And this is a method of inference which sort of tries to combine the results from several competing models. So this is the paper which tries to quantify the impact of meteorological covariates and ambient air pollution on solar energy, on solar radiation. And this is what we have recently submitted to the journal Solar Energy. We were also interested in doing some spatiotemporal analysis from the SRRA network, and later also from satellite data. We were able to get spatiotemporal information of very good resolution for a very long period on the meteorological covariates. There is a database on spatial distribution of solar radiation maintained by USAID. So one of the challenges of our project has been to merge the two data sets. It is a challenge to merge two spatiotemporal data sets because they are not measured at the same spatial or temporal resolution. So this is sort of where what we have achieved and where we are now for this project. Successes. Well, all our initial workshop participation led on to a bigger network. And finally, we were able to network with the National Institute of Wind Energy, which despite its name is actually the apex government body in India for forecasting of both wind and solar energy. So the forecast from the NIWE is actually used together with demand data to determine how much power should be generated by the grid. So here you can see that we have finally succeeded in arriving at a memorandum of understanding with the National Institute of Wind Energy. This memorandum of understanding was necessary because it allows them to share data with us. So here is a letter which I wrote to the registrar of our university, enclosing the copy of the MOU and asking the university to take the necessary steps. This is the scope of the MOU. We had several rounds of calls with the National Institute of Wind Energy. Our interest was in forecasting based on our talks with the Center for Green Energy. They added a few more areas of interest, one of which is how to handle missing data. A second is bias correction, so some kind of calibration of their institutes. And more broadly, the area of capacity building, which would enable us to train their personnel as well as to work on joint conferences and workshops. So this is an MOU which we are in the process of signing, and the first MOU should be valid for 5 years, giving us ample scope to explore further areas for application of data science. Technical learning from the project. So these are the models which we used. I have already mentioned the first three as our starting point. We have since then moved on to forecasting, and in that we have found Bayesian structural time series to be particularly useful. We also realized that it is not good enough to only predict solar energy. We also need to predict all the meteorological covariates. And so we have moved on to the multivariate extension of the Bayesian structural time series. Our data science group consists essentially of two groups, one from the Department of Statistics and one from the Department of Computer Science. So they have initiated parallel projects for forecasting, and the methods which they use are the long short-term memory models and a new area called transfer learning. So this is all work in progress and currently being translated into publications. I visited Eric in March, and though it was not possible to physically visit the NCAR, the National Council for Atmospheric Research in Colorado as planned, we did have talks with them and they shared some literature with us after the call. We find that they provide easy extensions of the kind of work which we have been doing. And short of a paper by McCandle, which is sort of an extension of this idea where they apply something like LSTM after clustering. So we hope that it will be possible to have linkages with the NCAR, which permit us to explore this together. The LISA 2020 project has also given us scope to explore linkages within the network. So this is a paper which we are working on together with Professor Olubusoye. It looks at a panel of countries called the IISA Consortium, the International Solar Association. It's basically all the countries in what is called the Sunshine Belt between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. We are looking at a kind of panel analysis of how these countries have grown with respect to their usage of clean energy and carbon emissions. Professor Olubusoye is very meticulous and very thorough with his comments. So this is a first draft of a paper and we are in the process of addressing some comments for him to get him a second draft. We have also been able to find linkages outside the field of clean energy. So Dr. Ezra Gayawan of LISA and I found a mutual interest in spatial analysis, and we are currently working on a joint publication which looks at HIV test data from Ghana. So this is like an some advanced results on HIV test positivity from Ghana. We are working on translating this into a paper. I had spoken in the past with some other LISA members. Specifically, I had spoken to Professor Adebanji, and we had talked about whether it would be possible to find a project which would address both her theme of women's participation and our theme of clean energy. The reason we thought so is that the solar energy industry, it employs a lot of women, and one of the offshoots of this is to promote financial well-being of these women. So at that point, we had thought of doing a joint survey. I do not know if that is possible given the pandemic, but I still hope that it will be possible to collaborate on something. So instead of the traditional thank you, I thought I would end with the more COVID-appropriate namaste. So namaste goes a bit deeper than thank you. It says, I salute all that is good in you. So I salute all that is good and resilient and the spirit of all LISA 2020 members. And thank you for giving me the chance to be a part of this network.
Thank you so much, Professor. That was great. And I think before I open it up for general questions and comments, I think there were some common themes with what we saw at UI-LISA, where there was initially, I think, a lot of concern over working with your chosen collaborators. And I would, I guess, congratulate you on continuing to push and finding collaborators. And I'd also say thank you for bringing up the idea of collaboration with other LISA labs, because that's going to be very important to the future of our network as we continue to grow. Let's see, I will go ahead and open it up for general comments and questions. So if anyone has any, you're welcome to put them in the chat, or if you want to just talk, that'd be great. And that could be for any of our speakers today. Okay, in the chat we have a question from Letitia Addison. Any privacy issues from the government of India regarding data for the app? So that's a question for Professor Ganguli. The question was, are there any privacy issues from the government of India regarding data for the app?
So I'm not sure which app you were referring to.
Was this the app for, I mean, it sounded to me like it was related to being able to track individuals over time. Yes.
For the DigiLocker, yes, of course, there are privacy issues. At present, they don't open it up to individual researchers. It's only for the government to be able to track. We have recently started this concept of a national ID, so they can track using the national ID. But there are plenty of privacy issues in terms of being available to individual researchers.
Got it, thank you. Other questions? I think there was a lot of great information given by these presenters. And even though some of the information was specific to their projects, I think it's very clear from all of them how it translates to other members of the network and other labs, no matter what population you're working with or what area you're working in. So I hope that this was useful for everybody. And we have about 9 minutes left in our planned time. So we do have plenty of time for questions, but I guess I would ask Eric if you have any comments you'd like to make.
Sure. So I would like to comment on the first talk. Let me actually find a screenshot that I created. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen, which is a screenshot of Professor Olubusoye's screen. But so I really liked this transforming evidence to action concept, this diagram that was shown, where there are development challenges. There's also evidence and knowledge out there. There's lots of scientific research. There's lots of, kind of local knowledge, indigenous knowledge. And then there are people, policymakers, development actors, researchers who want to address these challenges, using evidence for societal transformation. And it's these stat labs that are the key, like they're the missing piece, where with the stat labs, if we have really well-trained students and other staff and faculty members who can connect the policymakers with the evidence and to address these development challenges, then we can, we can catalyze this societal transformation. We can catalyze sustainable development. So I just wanted to, again, just point that out, that stat labs are central in being able to connect the users of data with the analysis, with the producers of data, with the analysis of data, and understanding the implications of the analysis. And that's what stat labs are really great at. So that's just a comment that reinforces what was said earlier. And it also is the role really for Professor Ganguly's stat lab in Calcutta in India, where her students and staff, postdocs and other colleagues, they're developing statistical models, they're developing data science and AI models to take the data and make useful forecasts to then give that to policymakers for societal transformation. So it's that stat lab, it's bringing in the data, the users of the data, and contributing the analysis of the data that really makes these LISA stat labs such engines for development.
Something I'll add to that really quickly is, I think one lesson that we learned as a network after these projects was, don't wait until you have the funding to reach out to these collaborators and these policy actors. Look for them now. And I think what we've learned since is working with the Teach Fund project, which is a transforming evidence to action. What is the CH for?
So it's transforming evidence to action capacity in higher education.
Yes, okay.
There's missing E.
Yes, got it. And I don't want that extra E at the end. I think though, we found that a lot of collaborators were willing to provide support in order to obtain the funding. So when you have the collaborators and they're willing to work with you, find them before you find the funding, find them before you go after the funding, because that will definitely ease the process, both of obtaining the funding and also working with those collaborators after you have found it. So I think that's one thing we've learned as a network. Let's see, we have about 4 or 5 minutes, and we can go a little long if someone has any questions or comments.
I have one more comment, which again came from the first talk, but that one of the lessons learned was to do good work. So being competent, being trustworthy and open and transparent will help these other organizations stick with you and invest more in you. And it seems like there are organizations that we know what they need. They need more capacity to harness the power of the data that they have. They need capacity to analyze data and transform that into decisions and ultimately action. We know that because we are statisticians and data scientists, and we deal with data all the time, and we see the power of transforming an Excel spreadsheet of numbers into actual actionable evidence. But somehow they don't necessarily know that. And it's hard for me to imagine somebody not realizing the potential of statistics and data science, because I am a statistician and data scientist who evangelizes about the extraordinary potential of statistical analysis and data science. So it's hard for me to understand why people don't understand how powerful and useful statistics is, and why they are not just knocking down on our doors of the stat lab asking for help. I know some people get it. They're like, oh my gosh, yes, this is exactly what I need. I heard that there's a stat lab and I'm knocking down on the door at 5 a.m. because you said you're going to open today and I need you. But so I guess a question would be for the network, like what is it that we can do as a profession, but also as the individual stat labs, but also as the LISA 2020 network to promote the benefits that we can provide to organizations, to policymakers, development actors, researchers, to help them in societal transformation. What can we do better as individual stat labs or as a network to make more people realize the extraordinary potential of statistics and data science? So that's the question that's out there. What can we do better?
Great. Yeah, and if you do have thoughts on that, feel free to share with the network. I think then we will just go ahead and end. I so really appreciate all of our 3 speakers today. I have a ton of admiration for the work that they've been doing. And I'm looking forward to seeing how our other LISA Stat Labs are going to be implementing some of these ideas. So thank you so much, everyone, also for attending. And Eric, do we have more events coming up that are already on the schedule? Okay.
Thank you. So this was our final LISA 2020 Symposium plenary event of 2020. We have some regional events that are being held potentially right now in Southeast Nigeria, or northern Nigeria. Southeast Nigeria and Southwest Nigeria are having events next week. But in 2 weeks from now, on December 16th, so that's a Wednesday, we have our final Zoom meeting, and we have presentations from 2 stat labs who are applying to join the LISA 2020 network. And then we are going to be continuing the LISA 2020 Symposium in 2021. Like one plenary session per month. That's the plan so far. We will have a different, we might have the same Zoom link for the future symposium plenary events, or we might change it. But we'll let you know through the newsletter, through our current list of emails. Oh yeah, and one other thing is we will post a recording of this event and the slides to the LISA 2020 website. So I think it's up to date. Until today, we don't have today's slides posted. But so Professor Ganguli and Olubusoye, could you send me your slides? Because then I'll put them in the Google folder and we'll have those posted to the website shortly. But anyway, thank you, Kim, for organizing and sharing, and thank you for our 3 speakers and for those who have commented and asked questions in the chat. And we look forward to seeing you 2 weeks from now in the Zoom, and then next month for the kickoff of the 2021 plenary events. So have a great rest of your day, rest of your week, and final month to the 2020 year.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Bye,
Stay safe.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Kim.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Goodbye.
Bye, everybody.